In July 2020, a Norwegian newspaper interviewed a Swedish woman called Åsa. She had been sick with COVID some months back, and now she was struggling with long COVID, lingering illness after the initial infection should have been over. And Åsa had a lot of symptoms. She had a fever, she had chest pain, she had stomach ache, burning skin, racing heart, shakes, back pain, swelling, diarrhea. She had problems getting enough oxygen, and she had problems concentrating. Åsa's story is a good example of how tricky it's been to report on the COVID pandemic for these last few years. You see, on the one hand, COVID is a new disease, and who knows what long-term effects it might be having on those who catch it. But on the other hand, a journalist should still verify their stories. Just because someone's illness started after they had COVID doesn't mean that COVID caused their illness, right? But how do you navigate that when you're sitting on Åsa's couch and you're listening to how miserable her life has been these last few months? How do you balance that empathetic presence in the interview situation with the need for journalistic verification? There are many ways of getting this balanced wrong. Some journalists have asked questions then and there in the interview, which have been taken the wrong way, and the interview is just frozen. Others have had the interview and the relations go sour after the interview because they asked follow-up questions that were perceived as disbelieving. And yet others have done everything right during the interview and after the interview. But then the patient got devastated reading the article once it came out, because elsewhere in it, an expert said something that made them feel like they weren't believed. I think that the solution to this balancing act lies in how we think about patient sources in our stories. We should stop thinking about them as like the human angle of our stories and start framing them as experts on their own lived experience. That means, first of all, you prepare. So before the interview starts, we should say, I will be asking you some difficult questions right now. And it's not because I don't believe you, but it's because the readers will be wondering. Then you give them the opportunity to explain, which means you don't ask, are you sure that your problems were caused by COVID? But rather, why do you think your problems were caused by COVID? And finally, and most importantly, you confront. If you know that you're talking to experts who have a different view on long COVID or on any other topic, then tell the patient that and let them give their views and be part of that debate on their own premises. I don't really know what happened to Åsa, how she felt about that article that came out a couple of years ago, or how she's doing now. And I don't know if she was asked any of these kinds of slightly difficult, slightly probing questions, though it didn't appear so from the article. But I do believe that we should ask these questions. It might start some difficult conversations with our sources, but I think it might also make it easier for readers to trust their stories and, by extension, our reporting.